Welcome to the video for Lesson 18 Workbook Exercises for Hebrew 1 and 2, Bright Old Testament 502, 504. Today we're going to be looking at the hafal instead of the hifil. Hifil obviously has an I-class vowel, hence the hi. Hafal has an O-class vowel or a U-class vowel. This pattern is going to be very similar to the PL and the pual that we're going to see in the next couple of lessons. The hafal is not that common in the Old Testament, but we do need to be familiar with it. So let's go ahead and dive into these exercises that correspond to chapters 28 and 29 in your workbook. In this first section of verbs, you are parsing the verb. Remember that Van Pelt likes to be a little tricky. Not all of these are hafals. So let's go ahead and parse number 1. Right off the bat, Van Pelt is tricksy here in number 1 because this is a hifil, not a hafal. You can see the hirik under the hay and the hirik yod after the kof. This is a hifil perfect 3 ms from pakad. What about number 4? Number 4 is also a hifil. You can see this by the mem, which is a participle marker. Underneath the mem, we see the patak, and we have a hirik yod after the kof. This tells us that this is a hifil. The hirik yod mem at the end tells us that it's masculine plural. What about number 7? Number 7 is not a participle. It is a hifil, though, which you can tell by the patak underneath the yod. The fact that there is a yod tells us that this is an imperfect 3ms. The hirik yod mem at the end of the verb is not a marker of the participle, masculine plural. Instead, it's actually part of the stem. This is from the verb shalom, to be at peace, to be complete, to be ended. The hirik yod mem in between the lamed and the mem shows that this is, again, a hifil. What about number 10? Number 10 is a hifil imperfect 1cs from shakal. We can see the fact that we have a hirik yod in between the kaf and the lamed. We also have an aleph prefix with a patak. All of these tell us that this is a hifil imperfect 1cs. If you're following along in the answer guide, this is labeled as a hifil perfect 3cp. Not really sure where that comes from. This is clearly an imperfect 1cs, which is how I've corrected it here. How about number 13? Number 13 is a hifil participle, feminine singular. We see the et at the end that tells us it's feminine singular. We also have the mem marking the participle and the patak under the mem telling us that it's a hifil. What about number 14? Number 14 and 15 are not actually required in your list of exercises. You're actually supposed to do number 16, which you should still do. However, I've included 14 and 15 here because we actually have a hafal, and I want us to have a hafal in a lesson on hafals instead of just a bunch of hifils. However, in the Old Testament, this is really how it happens. We end up with all these hifils, and then suddenly we have a hafal. So we need to not get lulled into complacency and just labeling everything as a hifil. Instead, we need to recognize that there are hafals in the Old Testament. This is a hafal participle because of the mem with the U-class vowel. We also have the segel tav at the end that tells us that it's feminine singular. What about number 15? Number 15 is a cal infinitive construct. We know it's an infinitive construct because we see ot, sot, and third hay verbs from asa will always be ot in the infinitive construct, not to mention the fact that the lamed preposition gives away that it's an infinitive construct. We have a third masculine plural suffix at the end of the verb, so that we end up with a cal infinitive construct from asa with the lamed preposition and the third masculine plural. Let's move on to our next set of exercises. This set of exercises is the same as the first few that we just did. We're parsing, determining whether or not these are hifil or hafal or some other stem. So how would we parse number 16? Number 16 is a hafal perfect. Again, we can see the O-class vowel underneath the hay. We know that this is an O-class vowel and not a long comets because of the fact that it's followed by a shva. And a shva, as you remember, closes a syllable, and a closed syllable will have a short vowel. This is a perfect 2ms, which we can see by the tav and the comets at the end of the verb. Let's do number 18. Even though we're doing every third, 18 is still an important one to try. Number 18 is a vav consecutive, starting with that vav plus the patak plus the dagesh in the first letter, which here is a tav prefix. We see the U class vowel under the tav, which clues us into the fact immediately that this is a hafal. We know that it's an imperfect 2fs because we have the tav prefix in the hiric yod suffix. What about number 19? Number 19 is a cow perfect 1CP. We see the yod plus the comets. We know that this is not a comets hatuf. It's not an O class vowel because there is no shva underneath the dalet. The dalet starts a new syllable, meaning that the yod plus the comets is an open syllable, hence it has to be a long vowel. We know then that this is a 1CP because we see the nu at the end, nun plus the shurik. We also have the root, yod plus dalet plus ayin, yada meaning to know. So a cow perfect 1CP. What about number 22? 22 is also cal, this time a cal imperfect. We see the I class vowel underneath the aleph, telling us that this is a 1CS. We know that this is a cal and nothing else because there's nothing else going on in this particular verb. It's just very simple, which is the very definition of a cow. Swift, slight, simple. What about number 24? How do we parse that one? 24, shockingly, is actually a hafal. We see the hey plus the U class vowel underneath the hey. We also see the 3fs ending, the hey at the end of the verb, so we know this is a hafal perfect. What about number 25? Number 25 is a hifiel. We see the hiric yod under the kaf. We see the hey plus the patak. We also see the shurik at the end, which makes us suspect that maybe this is a third common plural perfect verb. However, we have a patak under the hey, which in the hifiel means that it's either an infinitive construct or an imperative or an imperfect. We don't have a prefix, so it's not an imperfect, which leaves either the infinitive construct or an imperative. We know that it's not an infinitive construct because we have a shurik at the end, which is actually the marker for the second masculine plural. The fact that we had a tav prefix that dropped and was replaced by the hey plus the patak. So a hifil imperative 2MP. Let's move on now to our next set of exercises. In this set of exercises, we'll once again be parsing the verb, only this time we are working with weak verbs. So, how do we parse number 1? Number 1 is a straightforward hafal perfect 3fs. The 3fs being the comets hey at the end of the verb. We have a hey plus an O class prefix, so we know this is a hafal. We know it's from gala, a gimel plus a lamed plus a hey. You'll notice that the first hey has become the tav before the presence of the second hey, marking the 3fs. What about number 4? Number 4 is a cal imperfect 3ms from Amar. It is a vav consecutive. We know that it's a 3ms because of the yod on Amar, and we know that this is a cal imperfect, one of the angry baker verbs, giving us yomer, vayomer, very common word in the Old Testament. What about number 7? How do we parse number 7? We know that number 7 is a hafal imperfect because we have a tav prefix and a yod suffix. Together, those make the 2fs. We know that this is a hafal because we have an O class vowel under the tav. How about number 10? How do we parse number 10? Number 10 is a hafal perfect, second masculine plural. We know that this is a hafal because of the O class vowel under the hey. We also have the second masculine plural marking at the end, tam. Nothing else has changed, so this is a hafal perfect, not a hafal imperfect. Hey before tav always becomes a yod, which is why we have a yod after the lamed here. What about number 13? Number 13 is a hafal imperfect. Again, we have the tav prefix plus a kametz hatuf. This is a short o, telling us that it is a hafal. We have the na at the end. When you have nun plus a kametz plus a hey combined with a tav, we know we're working with a third feminine plural or second feminine plural. What about number 16? How do we parse this one? Number 16 is a hafal imperfect, again with a vav consecutive. We have the nun of the root letter that has become the dagesh in the gimel. We also have a U class vowel underneath the yod. So we know that this is a hafal imperfect 3ms, the yod being the marker of the imperfect 3ms, the hafal being the U class vowel, and our root being represented by that nun that has become the dagesh assimilating into the gimel. What about number 19? Number 19 is clearly a participle because of the mem. We have a mem with a U class vowel, so we know this is a hafal. We know that it's feminine singular because of the tav at the end of the root. Again, the nun has assimilated as a dagesh into the gimel. What about number 22? Notice the ot at the end of 22. We might be tempted to think that the ot here is a marker of the infinitive construct. However, that is only in third hey verbs. And you'll notice that we have a holam vav after our nun. This means that this used to be a one yod verb, yashav, that has historically been a vav with a holam vav, so it regresses to that holam vav when it's added with a prefix. So here we have no shavot. Since it's not a third hey infinitive construct, we then know that the ot is a marker of the feminine plural, which means this must be a participle. And the nun at the beginning of the verb gives it away that it is a nifal participle, feminine plural from yashav. And then last but not least, how do we parse number 25? Number 25 finishes us off with a hafal. Here we again have a shurik after the hey, which is surprising. We might expect an O class or U class vowel under the hey. However, in this particular verb, we get the shurik, which is still a U class vowel with a hey, so it tells us that we're either dealing with a one yod verb, which would be yakam, and that is not a verb that we have, or we're dealing with a hafal. And in this particular case, that's what we're doing. This is from kum, kof, shurik, mem. We have the two ms ending on the end there, indicating that this is a perfect, a hafal perfect 2ms. Well, hopefully that makes sense. Keep working through these exercises as you improve your Hebrew, and we'll pick up another stem next time.